All right, folks. A great honor, as I was saying, and a privilege to be here this afternoon before you. You have to be dedicated to CISM to do the last presentation of the day. Everybody's probably hungry, and that was a fabulous presentation by the Irish folks. It's nice to see what can happen when there's no political interference and no opposition to the implementation of the CISM model. Isn't it great? It just goes great. That was just a fabulous presentation. That's the real thing. Those people are really out there. So look, we don't know who's in the room when we do this. And I know we have limited time, but we're just going to go around the room and give a quick 2 seconds. Who's who? Yes, young lady. Chaplain in the front. You are?
I'm Lee Atherton from Massachusetts, and I am a chaplain.
Fire chaplain. And you have a partner with you?
I do. I have Shadow with me.
Okay.
Shadow is my black lab.
Shadow does great work. Yes.
I'm Michelle McCluskey. I am from Philadelphia, firefighter, EMS, dispatch.
Hey. Great.
Else will do.
Great to have. We're not doing this for filler. We have a lot of work to do this afternoon. We'll go pedal to the metal, but it's important because everybody in this room gives a lot, and you don't always get the chance to at least say who we are. Yes, ma'am. Wow.
Person.
Great.
That's it. You might know my husband, John Hopkins. He
Yes.
came back to be on site.
Yes, yes, you're a firefighter, right? Yes. Yeah, I do remember. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Christina Tobin. I'm an EMS lieutenant from Overland Park Fire Department in Kansas, just outside Kansas City, and peer support team member.
Great. Great to have you here. Yes, young lady.
Alana DeKeff from Massachusetts. I work on site, business manager, former EMT, dispatcher, jack of all trades, as you said before.
Yeah, that's modest. 18 years in the same ambulance I'm still on, and her husband was the director of Life Flight. And she also dispatched for the state police. Thank you. And you're also a town accountant, so we can't screw around with the books. Okay, good. All right, thanks. Yes, young lady.
Lena, clinical coordinator for On-Site Academy and military brat.
Yes, many years. Great to have you here.
I'm Kathy Minahan, and my role is peer support.
Okay, that ain't going to work, okay. Kathy and Valerie, my wife, started something called the WINGS program, Widows in Need of Grief Support, after the cold storage fire in Massachusetts, which we lost 6 firefighters in one evening, and at that time, that was the greatest loss of life in the fire service for many years since the Von Dome fire. At that time, President Clinton and Vice President Gore came to Worcester, and Kathy's line of duty survivor. Her husband, Steve Minahan, was killed in a fire in Charlestown many years ago, and it's thanks to her husband that we have something called a long lug out drill in the fire service, which is a way of finding out when there's zero visibility what direction the hose goes to get you out of the building. And that's known as the Minahan drill at the Fire Academy. God bless you, Kathy. Thank you for being here. Rose. That's also very modest. Talk about somebody who's been there, done it, got the t-shirt. All right, we'll move on. And thank you for the flag. And we did recognize the volunteers, by the way. I don't know if you're in the room when we did. But Tina.
Gina Cosentino from Massachusetts. I'm on, I do family support, and I work within the FDNY 9/11 responder community that are now getting sick after 9/11.
Thank you very much, Tina. You do many other things, too, for us. Yes, sir. Oh, great to have you here. Excellent.
Carrie Ian Scott, senior family support chaplain in St. Boston.
Fabulous. Well, we have another chaplain here, and as you know, CISM owes a great debt of gratitude to Australia and Robin Robinson and everything she did for us. So, as Jeff was the first to say, she did a lot of good research on CISM. Brother Brian.
Brian Claffey, Massachusetts On-Site Academy, former firefighter.
And Navy vet.
And Navy vet.
Thank you. And coordinated the residents. If you want to get somebody into our joint, which we're going to show you, the On-Site Academy, Windy Hill, otherwise known as Happy Camp, Brian's the man. Tony. And again, sorry, that doesn't work either. Tony 6 months out of the academy, was the only person on his department when they responded to a mentally ill woman who had barricaded herself, who had his gun out. And unfortunately, that woman came screaming out of her apartment, plunged a steak knife into his partner, killing him, and Tony was the only person ready for her and was able to take her down as well many years ago. And he's done more CISM interventions, more line-of-duty death interventions than I could possibly count. So it's an honor to have you here, brother. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. I'm Cece Shumpert. I'm an embedded prevention specialist with active duty Marine Corps with policy and program development, as well as LCSWA and clinical work with an acute unit and hospital.
Fabulous. It's great to have you here.
Air Force veteran.
Wow. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Yes.
I'm Jim Brooks. I'm actually an undergraduate student, but I'll be doing a talk tomorrow on resiliency, like childhood resilience. But I'm really interested in medical ethics.
Excellent. Okay, I'm glad to have you here. Yes.
Tina Brooks.
Hi, Tina.
Do a lot of training in CISM across the nation. Most of my responses are voluntary. I feel like that's my give back. But of course, I charge to train because I testified to pay to get trained. But also, my husband is 20 years my senior in the Vietnam veteran, 32 years
Wow.
in the military. I mean, tactical medical airback. His motto in Vietnam was "You maul 'em, we haul 'em."
Okay.
I've lived in that arena. I love this work.
That's wonderful to have you here. I understand you had a course from Tommy Greenhall in the back there on terrorism and thought it was pretty good. Yeah.
Of course, I have an academy, a training academy different than your academy,
Right.
but we've been around since 2008, just designed to train North Carolina, mountains of North Carolina people. And all these years later, we've trained people from almost 40 states, a couple countries, and it's been just phenomenal.
It's great to have you here. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Audrey Lowry. I'm a counselor therapist. I live in Cyprus, and I'm here with World Vision.
Fabulous. Great to have you here. You came a long way. I hope it's been worth your while. Glad to have you here. Yes, sir.
David Morris, working with California with substance and soon local response.
Fabulous. Excellent. Okay. It's great to have you here. 26 years in recovery. I'm glad you're here, brother. In the back. Yes, sir.
Roger Hamilton from Virginia, fire and rescue career, frontline story.
Fabulous. Okay. Thanks for being here. Yes.
I'm David Dillon from Howard County Fire and Rescue. I'm a peer support team lead for Bravo ship, for each ship, also a former Navy veteran.
Oh, great. Great to have you here. Dick?
I'm Richard Ryan, retired in Boston Fire, Metro Fire, CISF team, still active.
Many years. And one of the key people in the Boston Fire team, and what Jeff doesn't know, is that we had 20 minutes to get from the corner of West and Vesey at 9/11 to the debriefing that he was doing in Midtown rush hour traffic after the towers came down. And you were the one that got me there on time. I think that cruiser, that Boston Fire cruiser, was a smoking Hulk after that, if I recall. But if you want to get somewhere quick, Dick's the person. Yes, in the back. Oh, Josie. Hey. And next to you is?
Wyatt.
Excellent.
Josie's not speaking, my son Wyatt. We're on vacation. Not associated with any peer support team at all.
Gee, that's funny because you do more peer support than most people who are.
But anyway, so we came up to see some friends and hang out with Dr. Mitchell during World Congress.
That's great to have you here, Josie. Great to have you with your son. Thanks to Josie's mom, our place has a steady supply of excellent literature, the books that both Jeff and he have written. We hand them out to every single group that comes through, and we use it as part of our curriculum. And we are very, very grateful to your mom and to you, Josie, and for also what you've done when you've come up and the folks that you've gotten to our place. Yes, Jim.
Yes, Jim Duggan, I'm with Pittsburgh CISM team, and we're applied for residential treatment facility, personal long-term recovery, 32 years.
Congratulations, brother. Friend of Bill's as well. It's good to have you here. And we have a special feeling for Pittsburgh CISM because we did a conference down there several years ago, which was really a great experience. So you have great CISM down there, and obviously great AA too, I'm sure. And I think this gentleman next to you is, I'm not sure, is he new? Hi there.
First time. I am Jeff Mitchell. I'm from the University of Maryland. I'm in the Department of Emergency Health Services, and I'm also the co-founder of the International Critical and Stress Foundation.
Give a hand. My name is Hayden. Oh, this is a different meeting. I'm sorry. Tommy. I'm sorry, time's up. Excuse me. That's from making Depends jokes about me and asking if my fly would. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Because I was going to ask him how you did it for me. My name is Tom. My job is to be Hayden's handler when he's on the road. He tends to wander. Take a good look at him.
You want the picture on the milk carton. Tommy's being very modest. He was a firefighter medic full-time in Hyannis, which is Lindy's territory, in our state, and that's before he went to the dark side. I mean, before he became a police officer, and that was 33 years on Billerica PD as a lieutenant. He's retired now. He also is a dive master, teaches diving all over the country, dive rescue as well. If some lake in Colorado can't find the person and make the recovery, it's Tommy that they call. He happens to be director of training for the entire state of Massachusetts and CISM. So it's thanks to Tom that we have the program that we have. He's also an instructor for the American Heart Foundation Association, and he's a, shut up, thank you. It's my turn, I got the mic this time. And he's also, he has his own company and does excellent video work. And there's something else I'm forgetting because you interrupted me, but I can't remember. So now, also Tom, you may have been to his presentations, but he's one of the leading people in energy psychology and taking a lot of our work on understanding of energy and stress in the body and the mind to the next level, and being able to localize even in the body where such responses are. Thank you. Okay, this presentation, and we'll stop when we stop. Again, it's an honor to be before you. We are entirely rooted in CISM, 26 years. And it was thanks to Jeff and George many years ago that we got bitten by the CISM bug. It was CISD then. We go back to the American Critical and Stress Foundation days. And I won't belabor it with you, but I will just tell you, in Massachusetts, CISM, despite all the stuff that Jeff and George have put up with for many, many years, the attacks, many cases from clinicians, the attacks from folks, should we say, that have other motivations, particularly money. If you want to figure out a lot of this stuff, just follow the money. We got all of our methodology from CISM. And all we are, what I'm going to show you here today, is just a residential application of a CISM model. That's all it is. When we started it, we simply, because we all came out of the debriefing movement, and we're still on debriefing teams, CISM teams. Once in a while, there'd be somebody who needed a little more, and a debriefing was not quite enough. So we created a place, and Jeff supported us right from the beginning, and for many years, from 1992 to 2008, we had a dumpy little house on a side street in a small central Mass neighborhood. And we did a lot of good work then. We had 2,600 people through. But Jeff had always said to us, it would be really good if you had a place that kind of said to our people, they matter, they count. It would be really good if you had a place that had some serenity to it. It would be really good if you're going to take people that have been through line of duty death or injury, suicide of a working partner, death or serious injury to a child in the course of any emergency services operation, prolonged failed rescues, multiple casualty incidents, as well as victims where the incident were known to the respondents, and any incident where their personal safety was unusually jeopardized. That's our field. Be nice if you had a nicer place. So we bought the farm. And since 2008, thanks to a federal grant, we've been doing this stuff at a farm. So here's what I have to say to you. CISM works. We have a 90% return to duty rate in our program. And all we do is take the people that you may have worked with out in the street or in the community, and we give them a little bit longer time to decompress. And we have sometimes an entire day for a stage. So our first day is meet and greet. And everybody goes around the room, we get an inventory of what they've been exposed to, and they decide what their index incident is, what's the one they want to work on. The next 2 days are all debriefing. And many of the people on our staff in this room do that. And by Wednesday night, all debriefing has to be finished. And we're also doing thoughts and reactions during that time. And then Thursday morning, the only thing we have added to the CISM model is EMDR, TFT, some specialized symptom reduction techniques without which we really couldn't operate. And the foundation endorses those. And then by Friday, we don't open up anything new. That's the road back. That's the re-entry phase. They have to do a plan to indicate how they're going to prevent this from happening again. That's what we do, and that's all it is. Now today, if you look at everything we've done like the broad edge of a funnel, we're going to come down to the stem, but we only have a day. And there are circumstances where we can't get people for a full 5 days. We're lucky if we can even get them for a day. They've never taken a day off from the job just to take care of themselves or download what they've been through. So it's a compressed version of a 5-day program, but if you think of it from the other standpoint, when we do a debriefing or a diffusing or a community intervention, we only have 2 or 3 hours. So we try to flip that and say, hey, we're lucky. We have a whole day with them instead of, oh, geez, we only have a day out of 5. So if you only had a day, by what principles would your work be guided? Now, for some of you in this room, having a day would be a tremendous luxury. So I don't mean that, but at the end, Linda's going to talk a little bit about next steps, because we actually think that CISM teams should consider this one-day experience as something they might want to do a couple of times a year as an extension of their normal work, but it's just something to think about. In terms of models, we stick to the model. I know people have futzed with it. As Jeff was saying, they've tried changing the order of the stages. They've tried adding things. It just doesn't work. There's a reason why the model was invented the way it is. There's a reason why the SAFE-R is, I think, just as much of a crisis intervention model as anything Kaplan and Lindman did, and I wrote a book on Lindman. So I do understand that. But the SAFE-R model, if you're going one-to-one, you know how that came about. We have a group crisis intervention model. And peers came to Jeff and George and said, look, you've given us a roadmap for doing it as a group. We want to do it. By what principles should our work be guided if it's one-to-one? And they said, well, look, no. And there was a peer crisis. There was a one-to-one course then. I'm going back to the 1990s, but it wasn't as developed. And Jeff and George said, wait, we're not going to do that. Because I remember those discussions. If we teach you how to talk to another police officer, another firefighter, another EMT, we're going to kill it. You have a natural innate ability to do that. And the peer said, no, you're not going to get away with that. You gave us a format for groups. Now we need a format for one-to-one. Thus the SAFE-R model, which is fabulous. So we use all these models, we deviate from them, and they just don't work. So we stay to the letter of that model. But we have to compress it and modify it a little bit for our police. We're going to do this quickly. This presentation has a little bit for everybody. I have to warn you, there's some graphic videos in it. So for some of you who've been in combat here, there is a brief combat video because we talk about our one-day program for combat vets and how it came about. There is a brief video of the marathon. There's a reason why we call it the On-Site Academy. We were out in Oklahoma City twice. There's some people in here who weren't even born when the Mirror Building came down. April 3rd, 1995, 9:03 a.m. And there's people who may or may not remember the cold storage fire in Worcester, which was December 3rd, 1999, 6:13 p.m. We were also at the World Trade Explosion, corner of West and Vesey, with Dick and other teams for 27 days. And we happened to be working the marathon because we have contracts with Boston Police and Boston EMS when it happened. So there's a reason why we call it the on-site. We will go to that situation if you want us. But lack of research, well, Linda's been doing research on this for 15 years with us. So we're going to give her 15 to 20 minutes. We can't do more than that, but she has T-scores, Z-scores, one-tailed, two-tailed, donkey-tailed, all kinds of research, analysis of variance. We got lots to show that it works, that the model actually works. Granted, it is on a residential application of the model, but if you extend it, if it was going to do harm, it would do more harm by lengthening it. All it does is make it even more effective in terms of being able to get people back on duty. We have, of the 6,200 people that have been through our program over the last 26 years, we have a 90% return to duty rate. And we do have a 90-day substance abuse program as well for the gentleman who does that kind of work. And as we know from opiate abuse, that's a 90% relapse rate. Ours is a 90% success rate. And I just throw that in there. We're not the only church in town. There are other programs that do what we do, but we are the only one that uses a CISM model. So I'll give you a brief overview, really brief. We're going to let Linda do some of the research. We're going to just take a quick look at the combat program, a quick look at the WINGS program, which is for those line of duty spouses, and then we're going to tell you about the one-day model, if you only have one day, how that has worked out for us. And in some cases it hasn't. We'll be honest with you. Some cases it's good, some cases it wasn't that good. Good research gives you both. So let's rock and roll. I need to introduce myself. I'm Hayden. This is Linda. You go ahead. All right. I think we've done that. Next. Okay. So we are basically a short-term intensive residential model for folks. It starts with on-the-job stuff, but you can come to us if the marriage is in the toilet or the chief is driving you nuts or you have an alcohol or drug problem, but you don't need detox. You don't have to come for the specific trauma. We just find that the job-related trauma is the great equalizer, because that's the one thing that unites everybody. Leave your stars, your bars, your uniform, your badge at the door. Everybody's the same when you come in the on-site. Doesn't matter what jurisdiction you're from. Pain is the price of admission to this club. Yes, were you trying to tell me? You want me to get out of the way?
She needs to be tapped over.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Thanks, guys. We really appreciate that. Next. Okay. So, many years ago, the whole goal of CISM was to lessen the impact of the event and accelerate people's normal coping abilities. Jeff and George always said right from the beginning, this is not therapy. It's not intended to be therapy. It might be therapeutic, but it's not therapy. And there was a reason for that, because that way we wouldn't get in trouble with the licensed clinicians who would say, oh, you're training peers to do stuff that really clinicians should do, or your clinicians are taking work away from us because it's free. And we got into that trouble at the cold storage fire in Worcester. So it's designed, everybody got that? CISM will lessen the impact of the event and accelerate your own normal coping abilities. Will it make it all go away? No. Will it make it like it never happened? No. But in terms of what Jeff said just a few minutes ago, do no harm. Properly administered, even in a residential format, CISM certainly does no harm. Okay. Okay, yeah, no, blah, blah. Okay. If I'm bored by my own slides, we don't need them. Yeah, I think you know who we are. We're nonprofit, very nonprofit. Don't insult us with money. If you can't afford, all we ask is just the airfare. You know, your money's no good when you hit Massachusetts. We'll take care of people if they need to be taken care of. We don't accept insurance, and thank God we have contracts with Boston Police, Boston EMS, and other agencies will let you know. And the Commonwealth supports our agency. The legislature supports CISM in Massachusetts. The legislature gives $100,000 to the 18 CISM teams in the Commonwealth for training and for education purposes. So we're fortunate for that. Okay, let's just keep going. That's just a list of the kind of stuff we do. We have the 5-day program. We do have the extended care program. You can stay longer if you're not ready to go back. There's no capitation. There's no length of stay norm. You'd have to call the insurance company and fight for another 3 days. If the shoot incident or the dead baby or the fire victim incident is not cleared out, stick around as long as you can. We'll keep doing EMDR. We'll keep doing debriefing. We'll get Tommy in the back there in to do his voodoo stuff. And one way or the other, if we cannot lessen the impact of the event with all of that help, then shame on us. Something else is going on from it. We do have a very intense program that we run since 2008 for combat vets. It's pretty much straight out of combat. Most of the people who come to our program are straight off the street from the incidents. So it's right in their face. This is a relatively down and dirty, straightforward program. It's a military model, as is CISM. The people who trained us were not only this agency, but also the military, because they don't have enough civilian, they don't have enough clinicians, and they're happy to contract with civilians as long as we respect their people and treat them right. So we do have a group that's a 3-day group for combat veterans who are also first responders. I'm not going to go into that now. We gave a full presentation on that here. It's a great program. We've had only about 400 folks through since we started it, and we do it every 6 weeks. We have a line of duty entry program, which Tommy wants us to get going more of. We have a sexual assault survivors group. My wife runs that for those that have been sexually assaulted, either in the line of duty or earlier, and were triggered by a call that they went on. And we have the Widows in Need of Grief Services program, which Kathy spoke of, and we also do out-service work. So there's something happening. The center is 365, 24/7. We're not an emergency service, but there is no weekend or no day in which there isn't something happening there, and we have 13 staff that rotate through, although a number of them are volunteers. We don't like you to be able to tell when you come in the door. Can't tell the players without a scorecard. Our clinicians do not walk around with little name tags with little letters after their names, and our peers don't identify themselves as superior peer counselor. It's us, first name, because pain is pain, and most of our folks are not interested in what our credentials are, okay? Yeah, let's just keep going, because we don't have time. That's Happy Camp, and that's Rufus and Simon. Those are the two excellent therapists at the bottom left. Our donkeys, our Sicilian donkeys, not staff. Actually, they are staff. And yeah, okay, that's cool. It's a very nice place. We've had 6,200 folks through, over 450 combat vets who are also first responders in a separate program. In order to survive, we had to get contracts with public service agencies. So we have, since 1989, been riding the ambulances with Boston EMS. And we are there. We have a contract with them to serve their folks. Boston Police actually began in 1996. I don't know why that says 2006. I apologize. But if there's a line of duty shooting, or if there's a severe critical incident, their protocol is to send the folks up to the on-site, and we're there every week. Mass Department of Fire Services since 2004, and that's with the recruits as well as with the instructors, of which I am one. Department of Corrections, 2014. We've been working with them as well. They had 18 suicides in a short period of time. I know you should never say this, knock on wood, but it is true. Since they've had the contract with the on-site, because they didn't have any place to send their COs, and there's over 5,000 in the Commonwealth, not one active duty suicide. And that's not because we're so good at what we do. We can take them in and at least try to find out what's going on. Now, after I say this, probably tonight something bad's going to happen, but that is true. We haven't lost anybody since. Worcester EMS, kind of piggybacking off of Boston EMS, and then we have a new small contract with a CISM peer support team that's regional, thanks to Tommy and Linda, who helped to bring that about. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, now we're going to pass the ball to our gal, just because, and we'll try to keep this relatively brief, but it's important. We say we don't have numbers. We say we don't have randomly controlled trials. We say we don't have adequate research on CISM. Well, she does. Granted, it's in a residential standpoint, but it's important for you just to see what we found out.
Thank you. Our main goal is, 5 minutes is better. Our main goal is to make sure what we are doing is do no harm, obviously. And obviously we want to be able to prove that somehow. Unfortunately, we're not documenting every single person that comes in through the door. It's impossible. But when we are able to, we have them fill out measures so we can see where they're at and find out if we helped them out by the end. So I did a research in 2018 for the people that I could track, basically, that were mainly through either a 3 or 5 day program. And we had 162 admissions with the average age of 42. Why does that matter? We like to know when are people realizing when they really need help. You know, it's not, we have a range of 22 to 61-year-olds that came through last year, but it's important to realize where we can intervene in somebody's recovery. Predominantly males, 84%, and because of the contracts we have, we've realized that Massachusetts, we covered 95% come from Massachusetts. It used to be just 70 before these contracts, so a lot of people are utilizing it, mainly 3 to 5 day programs, and out of 162 people, 111, it was their first time going through the program. With the DFS contract, I believe, is mainly why we have 48% is fire, 30% police, and you can see the breakdown for EMS. Corrections is going to go up more now that we have that contract. They are utilizing it more. And dispatch nurse, we don't say no to anybody as long as they're first responders or family members. The average year on the job is 15 years, ranging from 1 to 40. I have a theory of the 10-year rule is, you know, everybody loves the job, they're hitting the road running for about the first 10 years, and then they hit the brakes and go, I can't wait to retire. So it's true, 15 years into it is mainly where people are starting to say, you know, I think I've had enough. Military experience, we had about 30% of our people come through last year that had military experience, of which 22 of those 44 people were exposed to combat, which we need to know that too for the cumulative effect between public safety work and military experience in their past. It's important to know. About 25% came in reporting alcohol issues. That does not mean they didn't have alcohol issues, they just might not be aware of them yet. But that is part of our program as well. We deal with substance use and drug addictions. So, and about 7% had issues with drugs. Of those people, 36% were clean for less than 20 days, 70% were clean for less than 28 days for the alcohol. And then about 20% reported being victims of sexual assault prior to the age of 18. Why does that matter? Cumulative effect, once again. So we are able to try and individualize our treatment plans for people based on what they're coming in with and what their histories are, and I think that's important too. So some of the things that we do, and there's going to be a procedure slide, which probably should have been first, but what we do is when they come in, they obviously go through the residential manual and make sure that they realize what our expectations are for the week from them. It's a sober house, you know, it's we have somebody on call at all times, things like that, and we have them go through that, and then we ask them to fill out 2 measures. One of them is the impact of event scale revised, and that is designed to just basically assess where they're currently at on subjective distress. It basically lists a bunch of symptoms, asking you, have you experienced any of these in the past 30 days? If so, how intensely? It looks at 3 different subscales, the intrusive, avoidance, and hyperarousal, and if you're a clinician, you'll realize this coincides with post-traumatic stress disorder and part of the criteria for that. And that's why we chose this, as well as it's a well-validated measure. This helps us out, too, to actually individualize people's treatment plan, because if they're walking in with higher intrusive subscale, then maybe we need to do more debriefing with that person. Or if they're higher avoidance, maybe we need to kind of do one-on-one with that person, try and get that person to come out of their shell a little bit more or expose them a little more. Of that scale, it goes from 0 to 88. The higher scores represent more distress. So based on this measure, a cutoff score of 24 or more, PTSD is a clinical concern. 33 or more represents the best cutoff score for a probable diagnosis of PTSD. And this was interesting. 37 or more is high enough to suppress your immune system functioning even 10 years after the event. Kind of interesting. I think it's interesting, but I guess I'm a geek. PTSD checklist. This is actually new for us. We didn't use this measure. We used the BSI before. But we changed to this one last year because we realized it's actually giving us more information to help individualize a treatment plan for somebody. So this measure coincides with the DSM-5's diagnostic criteria for PTSD. It assesses the presence and severity of PTSD. You can't take this measure, use it, and say, oh, you have PTSD. but you can give a provisional diagnosis of PTSD. There's 5 clusters that correspond with the 5 clusters in PTSD: intrusive symptoms, persistent avoidance, negative alterations in cognition and mood, and increased arousal symptoms. The total score goes from 0 to 88. Obviously, higher scores mean more symptoms. And a cutoff score of 38 or higher appears to be reasonable to be diagnosed with a provisional diagnosis of PTSD. So, and we, like I said, we don't use this just for research. We use this actually to help the treatment plan. So each individual takes it on time 1, which is basically when they walk through the door. They've already had an intake. That's about the most that they've been exposed to our program. And then after everything's done and all the program components are complete on Friday, after their discharge plan, they once again complete the measures, but they're answering them based on have they experienced that recently in the past 24 hours, or how are these symptoms doing for you now? This is the statistical part that you may not want to hear about. But in order to do a time 1, time 2, we do pre and post. It's called a paired samples t-test. That's a statistical procedure we use to see if the difference between when they walked in versus when they leave is clinically significant. Is it big enough of a difference to say that we made a difference? And they're with us for all 5 days. That most people do not go home, so it's not like they're seeing their therapist at home that might say, oh, well, it's because they had a therapist appointment every night. So they're with us, which helps to at least say something in this program helped them out. We also do an evaluation and ask them what they liked, what they didn't like, and it's anonymous, so they don't have to put their name on it. So for the impact of event scale, the cutoff score, once again, was 37 or higher is significant. Average on time 1 when they walk in was 44. So they're showing pretty good symptoms at that point. When they left on Friday, or whatever, time 2, it was down to 22. That's cut in half. That's statistically significant. So there is, and on each subscale, you can actually look at the subscale scores: avoidance, intrusive, and hyperarousal. And on each one of them, it was significantly cut, where we could say this person has had a difference. I'm trying to go this way, but then I do echoes, sorry. On the PCL-5, that was 0 to 80, and the cutoff score was 38 or higher, was a really significant number. On Monday, they walked in, and the average score was 40. And when they left on Friday, it was 20. Once again, that difference is actually showing improvement in people on average. And that was also with each subscale. One thing that I will mention that I was kind of shocked at is that cutoff score that said that you could basically diagnose somebody provisionally with PTSD. I looked at the people on whether they met criteria on time 1 for each one, and about 71% of the people that walked in on a Monday met criteria for PTSD. But by Friday, only 25% met criteria. To me, that's huge. That's saying, wow, they don't feel these symptoms that they walked in with anymore. Something's working. Maybe it's the water. Maybe it's the donkeys. We don't know. But that is a significant change, and people did get better. And we do actually reach out to people about 30 days and 90 days afterwards for a follow-up. And Colleen is the one who's actually doing most of that. And she gets pretty good results saying that, things might have happened and life might be bumpy still, but for what they came for, things are pretty much still doing pretty well, which I know is qualitative, but still means something to us because we want to make sure that people are getting what they need. Of the program evaluations, so we do a scale of 1 to 5, least beneficial, most beneficial, right? And we looked at, okay, well, we want 4s and 5s. That's what we really want. And if we're not getting 4s and 5s, then we might be doing something wrong. So let's look at the program. We do a psychoed component, and most people liked it. 98% shows either 44 or 5, which is great. We also do yoga. Some people don't really like yoga. They don't want to bend, whatever the case may be. For the majority of people, though, 80% loved it. Acupuncture. Some people have issues with needles, so that's okay. But it still got 70% found it beneficial. we're not going to get rid of it because it is beneficial for a lot of people that we see coming through. But we do give people the option if they don't want to do it. So EMDR, at least for the people that we treated last year, of the 162, 100% of them chose either 4 or 5 on that scale, which was pretty good. We're doing something well. The alcohol assay work, you know, people are a little funny about whether or not they're ready to admit if they have a problem or they don't have a problem. So, but for most people, it does work for them. So we look at critical incident lists and talk about what symptoms are and give a little of education about that. People are pretty happy with that. Massage, once again, some people don't like to get touched, but still 89% is pretty good. I mean, we'll take these numbers all day long because people are generally saying we're doing what we need to do. Group debriefings are always up there, 96%. Peer support, always up there, and one of the biggest components that we promote. And then anger management, well, it's 86%. So of the things that we offer in this program, nobody's not liking it pretty much, but we're getting pretty good results. And then when we look at the facility, it's funny because I've done research since 2004 there, dating back all the way to 1992 when it opened. And safety is always, we give them a choice of 1 to 5, looking at facility things and lodging and cleanliness. Safety is always number 1, the highest one, which I find really important because that means when I think that's part of the program, is they walk in and they feel safe. And they might not have felt that way in years. And I think that's a huge component that we were able to look at and go, okay, well, that's great, and we need to keep promoting that. Make sure that people walk in and realize that they can be open, they can talk, they will have peers there. And when combining, asking, the last question we ask is, would you recommend this program to another first responder? With 1, not at all, and 4, without reservation, 100% chose either 3 or 4. So we're pretty happy with these results, and hopefully we can maintain this. And basically our conclusion, their symptoms are being reduced, great. We feel like we're increasing hope in people just because something is working for them, and they're walking out feeling like they can keep going in treatment. And we want to see what else we possibly need to improve on or what we can change to make sure everybody gets what they want and they need. That's my piece.
Unsung hero, 15 years, and that's only just 1 year, 2018, but she's done 4 data collection points, so Linda's done an absolutely incredible job. And that's and next. Linda said as we were doing this, even if you're only talking to somebody once, it can make a difference. So now we're going to thank you for looking at the 5-day approach. We don't always have 5 days. And a lot for the younger officers with babies and young marriages. We can't get them for 5 days after a shoot incident. For the younger firefighters, like we had a line of duty death in Worcester recently. Chris Roy, great firefighter, had a 9-year-old daughter. Just a few days from the time that 2 years earlier John Davies had died. And then really 1990, only December's a bad month for Worcester Fire. The cold storage fire was also in the month of December. So we don't have 5 days with those folks. We were lucky to get many for 5 days, but many also come for a 1-day program. So I'm an old guy. It's great to see a younger crowd in here as well. We need to pass the baton to the next generation. We need to have people who believe in this work, who stand by the CISM model, who understand that basic goal of lessening the impact of the event, accelerating your own normal coping abilities. And the one thing that's kind of a hallmark of CISM is humility. We realize it's not the only model, but it's a model that works very well for us. And in AA we say humility doesn't mean thinking less of yourself. It means thinking of yourself less. So everybody in this room does a lot for other people. So think about if you have a CISM team, if you are interested in a compressed model or a 1-day experience as a team, this is kind of what we put together. How did it come about? it came out of work with the combat vets. And I'm not going to go into the Restore program. I don't show this videotape for any other reason except to say that since 2008, we have been listening every month to every 6 weeks for 3 days. That's a volunteer program. Nobody gets paid in that program, including the staff. Submission to the heart to some of the most awful things that human beings can be exposed to. And it's an honor for us to listen to them, but this is just a quick, Tommy teaches a great course, Battlefield to Street, on understanding what it's like for first responders who have also been in combat, or who come back from combat and get triggered on the streets, Boston or wherever, from what they went through, and maybe didn't realize what they went through. So this is just a little clip that gives you some idea of the intensity of what these folks go through. I want to thank our staff, it's all volunteer, who helped us with that program. And if you are not prepared to listen to 3 days of that, then don't do it. If you have the stones to do it, I guess we feel, Byros, the least we can do is listen. We didn't have to go through that. So if we can't even listen to it and help them, of what use are we? It's the CISM model. And they debrief what they went through in the first 2 days, and then on the third day, and it's on the weekend, it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they get EMDR. We have a pool of clinicians that come in and donate their time, including Tommy, including Linda, including Kalina. And the program is really run, it's a peer-driven program, CISM model, clinically supported. And the two people that run it and started it with me are a Boston police officer who had 2 tours in Fallujah and is on the SWAT team, and a firefighter paramedic on a full-time department in the North Shore who had 6 tours. And they were in Fallujah together, so they started it. But it's not just for Marines, it's also for Army, it's also for Air Force. We've had many Air Force folks through. Be careful about Air Force people, because you may think that they don't get exposed to the forward combat situations, or they may not be exposed to the same things that an infantry unit. That's not true. Air Force folks get deployed in onesies and twosies. They don't have the support or the unit cohesion of a unit with them, and then they get embedded in many of these units that then they do the same thing. So, and they're right up there in the front. So, you know what they say about assume. Make an ass out of me, make an ass out of you. Never assume, whether it's Coast Guard or any branch of the service, that they haven't seen a lot. And they also, another thing to be aware of is our particular model. Next slide, thank you. It's based on CISM. We integrate CISM into all those pieces. And we have people that will, they go through their boot camp experiences and boots on ground in their first combat. We have folks that have had 600 missions outside the wire in their 2 deployments, 3 deployments. And the Hogue study, which Tommy presents in his program, showed that anybody exposed to more than 5 firefights, their increased risk of PTSD is 20%. 5 firefights. You know, our people lose count of the number of times they've been mortared, shelled. If you watch that video, that was 2 minutes. That was just another day in paradise. Try doing that every day for 11 months. And then, as David Grossman said when he presented here before, nobody comes back from combat unchanged. Now, we talk about post-traumatic growth as well. It doesn't mean you can't come out of that like a piece of tempered steel. It doesn't mean that you can't come out of that with new insights. But we have to use a different list of incidents for the folks in this program. You know, incidents where they lost a battle buddy. Incidents with failed extractions where they were not taken out when they were promised to be taken out and suffered casualties. Incidents where children are used as killing instruments. Instruments where interpreters turn out to be spies. So there's a different list than the one that I gave you for the 5-dayer, but it is an honor to work with those folks. But that reduced our model from 5 to 3, and sometimes down to 2. So let's keep going. The Widows group is a fabulous group, just mentioning specialty groups. They're also 3 days, though. And then we get to the double I, and that's the intensive intervention program. It was just kind of a natural outgrowth of a smaller time frame, and it actually came out of our experience at the marathon.
At the finish line of the Boston Marathon, there was some sort of explosion.
At 2:50 p.m., there were simultaneous explosions that each scene resulted in multiple casualties.
I would be shocked if many of the people that were injured today were not from Massachusetts. They're probably from other states, probably even other countries.
We will get to the bottom of this, and we will find out who did this. We'll find out why they did this.
So there's a reason why they call us the On-Site Academy. We will go to you if you so wish. And we happen to have been there because we have contracts with... Okay, that's okay. We have a commitment to Boston Police and Boston EMS that we've had for many years. So we ended up in Tent A. And Dick Ryan and Boston Fire did... I don't know how many debriefings you did in the aftermath. Were you part of that too, Linda? How many do you think how many station visits? And you probably lost count.
They were going for, 3 months, Linda?
Yeah.
Something like that? Yeah. Yeah. I just happened to be in Florida relaxing, and the rest of the team, along with Linda in New York, fire command to help out do it. But Charlie told me it was something like 3,000 hours.
Yep.
of that.
And Boston Police, it was also, go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's actually still going on. It's
Yep.
still one-to-one, still being on to this day.
And in Boston Police, it was the same thing. It was 3 months. It was over at the, the center, the Electrical Workers Center, whatever it is. Where would we have been without CISM, Jeff? We would have been nowhere. The city of Boston was completely served by a CISM model. And I'm not saying that to kiss whatever. I'm too old to care about that. I think you know we go back a long ways. And it's important for you to hear that. As you're going out the door, for you and George to know, everything that you've given, all the heat that you've taken all these years, all the crap that's been visited on all of you, when the defecation hits the rotary blades, and it happens, that's what everybody wants. They want a CISM model, and they want it right away, and they want the whole thing. The CMBs, the diffusings, the one-to-ones, the debriefings, and we're still doing it. We shut our place down from April 15th to July 3rd and did nothing but one-dayers on the bombings. So thank you, my brother. So thank you. I'll give you a hand as you're going out. So that's where the one-dayer was born. It was born out of a tragedy. Because who's got time? They didn't have 5 days, but they all needed something. You cannot go through those sights, sounds, smells, and people cannot diagnose themselves. They do not know how that's going to affect them down the line. Everybody that's been on the job in this room knows that. You have to remain operational when you're out in the field. You know, feelings are the F word, and they do get in the way. You have to serve and do what you need to do. But it's that emotional law of gravity, right? What comes in has got to come out. And so you're not a well-aged fence post out there. Anybody who went through that, especially at the finish line, it's the element of surprise, too, because we've worked the marathon every year since. We were there this April 15th. It's a beautiful day in Boston. It's a fun day. The weather sometimes is not beautiful. It's Boston, it's New England, but there's nothing bad about the marathon. Even if you're not a runner and you're not athletic, painfully obvious, you just can't help but get caught up in the goodness of it. And the fact that there's 20,000 people running, and there's the wheelchair people, there's everybody. To trash that event and turn it into a terrorist event hit the soul of that city. It hit it really hard. And the first responders, and it's not been mentioned much, but a number of them were injured badly, including some Boston police officers. And as you know, we had 3 deaths, including Martin Richards, beautiful little boy. So, yeah, that's going to hurt. So the one-day program, it's better than nothing, right? You got to do something, clear off the fire in their eyes, and they were so rageful. So that's where the one-day program started. And sometimes there are too many folks to serve in a 5-day program. So you got to at least get the trauma narrative expressed. We're a big believer in the trauma narrative. It's controversial. There are a lot of clinicians, even to this day, that will say, let sleeping dogs lie. You're going to re-traumatize somebody by having them talk about it. You're going to increase cortisol levels in the brain. Cortisol is very destructive to the hippocampus, to memory cells. You're doing harm. That's why we're doing this presentation. That is BS. First of all, they're already being triggered all the time. They've got it in their head. They got the sight, sound, smells. I think you saw from Linda's research, when they come to our program, even without something like the marathon, they're already symptomatic. And they meet the criteria on standard measures. So if you're going to tell me something like the marathon doesn't need to be cleared off, and we're just going to medicate it and stuff it down, I'm going to tell you that's like a kid at the beach with a beach ball. And the more you stuff that down, the more it's going to take your head off when it comes up. Eddie Lee from the State Police Stress Teams, not mine, but it's a good image. So I'm not going to argue clinically the value or the lack of value to what we call the fact phase in a debriefing. I'll simply tell you that the research for us shows it's essential. Don't just dump pills on it and send somebody home and say, oh, don't talk about it, it's going to make it worse. That will make it worse, because it's like a toxic chemical in an aquifer. It's going to sit there until another incident stirs it up, and then they're going to be worse. So obviously we believe in early intervention. And might I just say, one of the most critical things on the ICISF was the Cochrane Report. Everybody knows the Cochrane Report if you study research on CISM. And it slammed CISM before the World Trade. And it said any crisis intervention program should have slammed it because of the trauma narrative, do harm, etc. It said, the Cochrane Report, any crisis intervention program should have the following components. Early intervention, there's nothing to be gained. Time does not heal all wounds in trauma work. It's like if I have a gaping lac down to the bone in the back of the ambulance, I'm not going to let that person just sit there and say, oh, that's okay. Time will heal all wounds. What's going to happen if I don't do anything? It's going to get infected, septic, and now we have a systemic problem. So the same is true if it's really an intense trauma that affects the memory part, the hippocampus, the videotape in the mind, and the amygdala, where the powerful emotions reside. It's not just going to go away. You can medicate it with alcohol or opiates, you can stuff it down, but it ain't going no place. So what we found is it's essential to get that stuff up and out. The goal of all trauma work is just to make it past, right? We can't make it like it didn't happen. We just don't want it in your face any longer. We can't change what happened, but we can help change your perception of it, particularly if we can reframe it to, you did the best you could. And if you're going to tell me that anybody exposed to what you saw in that clip doesn't need at least to talk about it and try to download it, that's not true. It just doesn't work. So, in any case, you might get nothing more than just the fact phase in a one-day model, okay? We'd like to get to thoughts. We'd like to get to reactions. We'd like to get to symptoms. We'd like to do some teaching. We'd like to do reentry. But at the very least, you got to get the story out. You got to get a beginning, a middle, and an end. You have to know what they saw, what they touched, what they smelled, what they heard, what they have to go through. Because if you don't get that out, it's a danger zone from there on. And how do you know it's not going to happen again? Oh my, what happened 3 days later in Boston? Sean Collier, MIT police officer, got killed. Finding the bad guys. And what ensued after that? A wild car chase throughout the city of Boston into Watertown, a huge shootout in which we almost lost one of our officers who almost bled out the scene, exsanguinated. And we had a whole other trauma. And the bad guys were throwing bombs out of the car as they went. And that's not an exaggeration. You can see the films, you can hear the audio. So if we thought that they weren't going to need something, you can't guarantee that 3 or 4 days later, something else isn't going to happen. Fair enough? So I'm just making the case, not only does CISM work, but we owe it to our people to not send them back. We feel the same way about the combat vets. After what you saw, and that's just one little 2-second video. You could have 11 months of that. I'm going to say, oh, it's fine. Give them a couple of months off, rest and relaxation, then another deployment. Going to send somebody back in without taking care of them, without at least giving them the opportunity to talk about that and download it. You matter, you count. As they say, you know, the military is at war, America's at the mall. Well, CISM is not. CISM should be right there behind them, particularly those that are dually, wear 2 helmets. They wear the combat helmet and they wear the first responder helmet. All right, so that's the rationale. Now, got to do some theory. Don't mean to be boring, but let's keep going. Yeah, it's okay. It's all right. Thank you. Okay, rationale. Just in case, and Linda's we will stop soon because hopefully there'll be some discussion on this. What we're just asking you to think about, since a lot of people in this room are pretty sophisticated, you've done CISM for a while, you've probably done interventions, you may have worked some multi-casualty, multi-day events, but certainly you've taken care of your people. We're just suggesting that there is a possible next step, that maybe a couple times a year or once a year or once every quarter, your team could offer a sort of wellness day where we use a CISM model, where we get people together, and whether it's on a one-to-one basis or on a group basis, they just talk about how the job is going to keep up with it. We don't always want to wait for the big one. And our data suggests there are those of us that will volunteer to do that. And you know what kills CISM teams, according to the research? Lack of utilization. You got members that put all this work into the training. They come here, they go to their monthly meeting, and they don't get used, they don't feel useful. They don't get deployed. So I'm just saying from a practical standpoint, too, it's a unifying thing to have such a day where you get your clinicians, you get your peers in, you offer it to your areas. You know, Jeff said originally, CISM teams should cover 20 towns or an area of 100,000 people, unless it's for a specific department. So there should be enough interest in it. But to go ahead, this often involves a single contact and empathy. There's a lot of people high on empathy in this room, empaths. So let's just take a look at the rationale for it. If you can only see somebody for a day and they've been through something like the marathon, of what possible use is your work? So, in many cases, it might be only a single contact, and early intervention has got to work. When we do the single double I program, we can't guarantee we're going to see you again. We're lucky to get you for a day as a firefighter, EMT, police officer, SWAT team member. Keep going. Thank you. So, I'm going to ask you to just take you back to 1933. Jessie Taft, the person who originated the work on the single contact. She was a social worker in Philadelphia in the row houses during the Depression. And she had one visit per year with each family. And she worked all day long. She'd go from family to family to family to family all year long. And she'd only have an afternoon with them. And, you know, her colleagues would say, what are you doing? What's the point of that? Of what possible use can you be when you're just with a family for an afternoon? So I'm just asking you to think, in terms of the work you do, never underestimate the importance of what you do. You have people, I'm sure, some people in this room have had that experience, who come up to you in the mall or come up to you in the station or come up to you 5 years later and say, oh, that was fabulous what you did for me. Do you remember the such and such and so? And we're looking at them, I know it happens to you, we're looking at them with a blank stare. We don't remember. It's like on the ambulance, the big red truck, when people come up and give you a hug and thank you for what you've done. We're clueless, 1,000-mile stare. Who is this person? So you never know the importance to that person. You have a year full of people's worst days in their life. But to that person or that first responder, that might have been the worst call she ever went on. So Jessie Taft wrote a book about those experiences to answer that question. And it's kind of a philosophical one. Why am I doing this if I'm only going to see this person once? And it's just funny because she was trained by Otto Rank, who was an analyst, who believed in time limits. And he believed that people work harder in therapy if you give them a limit, 6 sessions, 10 sessions, whatever. And Freud was very bitter against him and said, it's interesting that the conclusion of therapy, Otto, always coincides with the departure of your summer cruise ship. Because Freud believed in interminable analysis. He believed there should never be a limit set. But Jessie Taft was trained by Otto Rank, so she believed in time limits. Okay, so here's what she wrote, and then I'll leave this. I know it's theoretical, but it was the basis of a lot of work we did. If there is no therapeutic understanding and use of one interview, many interviews equally barren will not help. I kind of like that. In other words, if you alienate the first responder you're working with in one intervention, it ain't going to help to see that person for 3 more times. We know CISM is not therapy, but it is therapeutic. And she says, therapy is a matter of degree and depth and may be present anywhere. Therapy is potentially present wherever the therapeutic attitude is maintained, whether the contacts be one or many. Again, we use this as a rationale for the single contact. That the therapeutic attitude or the CISM attitude is what? Whose needs are being served? Theirs, not ours. No matter what you've been through, when you get called to do that intervention, and it may not be convenient, and it may be just the one time when you were planning to go out with your family, or the one time when you had something else to do, you go, don't you? Because when you're called to serve, it's really like a 911 call. You know, there's no difference. Only it's one of us that we're taking care of. So that's what she means by the therapeutic attitude. She didn't go into those row houses and those families thinking, this is demanding on me. To her, it was an honor, it was a privilege. I'm just giving you a little rationale for the single contact. And you can take it even further and get a little hoopy, a little philosophical. She pointed out that coping with that issue, if I allow myself just one contact with this person, and for us the analogy is 1 day, not 5, by what principle should my work be guided? It's a little different then. If I don't know that I might not see you again. And the issue is, if one cannot live forever, is it worthwhile to live at all? In narrower terms, we could just say, if one can only have one debriefing or one intervention, is it worth doing it all? Next, thank you. And I know this is death by PowerPoint, and we should only have 5 lines and 20 characters per, but she writes elegantly. And this is 1933. Nobody writes like this anymore. So I'm just going to ask your forbearance, and then we'll leave the theory section. I just want to read what she wrote. Time represents more vividly than any other category the necessity of accepting limitation as well as the inability to do so, and symbolizes therefore the whole problem of living. One might finally define relationship therapy, which she was doing in those few hours in the family, as a process in which, and dig this, the individual finally learns to use the allotted hour from beginning to end without undue fear, resistance, resentment, or greediness. When he can take it and also leave it without denying its value, without trying to escape it completely or keep it forever, if he can live this hour, he has in his grasp the secret of all hours. He has conquered life and time for the moment and in principle. What's that about? All we have is today, right? Tomorrow's not guaranteed. We never know what our people are going to be exposed to tomorrow. But you have that hour with that person, or you have that debriefing with that person. And we also, there's a little bit of teaching in the structure of CISM. We are trying to show them, look, if you use this method, we can help at least clear out what you've been through. We can't guarantee this won't happen tomorrow, and we can't make it like it didn't happen. But again, we can guarantee that it will lessen the impact of what you've been through and accelerate your own normal coping abilities. So that's the rationale for it. And then we'll wrap up, and then we'll have some time for questions just by talking about that's why it matters. You matter, you count, even if a single contact is all we can get. Okay, so that's the double I, that's the intensive intervention program, and that's our contribution, I guess, to the CISM movement, that on a residential basis, I grant you it is a residential basis, so the research is not on an out-service basis, it's not on debriefings in the community, but I think the data is pretty clear. Lessening the impact, clearing off the fact phase, making sure that they tell their story, and then where possible, getting the thoughts that made them feel afterwards, the guilt particularly. You know, Rose was here earlier talking about a kind of poor job she felt was done on the issue of survivor guilt. But, you know, you in emergency services, we share a lot with combat vets in the sense that it's achieved the goal, not the glory, right? Achieve the mission. And the last person you think of is yourself. But if we feel something we did or something we didn't do contributed to a negative outcome, guilt in our field is the highest correlation to developing post-traumatic stress disorder. For civilians, it's experiences that are simply outside the normal range of anything they'd ever see or go through. Sight, sound, smells, things they're just not prepared for. For you, it's another day in paradise. You know, we're sitting at the station having a sandwich or maybe spaghetti sauce, and I'm saying to Brian, hey, did you see that brain matter on the side of the road? Give me some more spaghetti. Like that is not what, in general, we have found is very hard for you. What's hard for you is if something you did or something you didn't do in your mind contributed to a negative outcome, whatever field you're in. And the bottom line of all of this work, and Doug was here, but he left, is suicide prevention, right? That's the bottom line. The goal of all trauma work is to make it pass, but the bottom line is suicide prevention. When that evil little thought gets planted in there, you can have 10 people in a debriefing, and 8 of them are walking out joking. They came in looking like dog dookies, and now they're going out smiling and backslapping, and they're going right back on shift. But there's one person over in the corner. Didn't work for her, or it didn't work for him, because there's a little more that they have to get. That stinking thinking got in there. Yeah, this is nice, but what I did contributed to a negative outcome. And you have to get that out. You've got to get that guilt out. So that's why where we can, we want to try to get to the thought phase. And then we need to get to the worst part of the event. And if we do that well, then we can come in with the symptom reduction techniques, including Tommy's TFT, EMDR, a lot of our staff do TFT, and other techniques, and we can clear it off. AA talks about being strong in the broken places. You know, we're sort of spot welding, trying to find out where's the damage, what's the real damage to this person's soul that this incident or this combat incident did to them, because you got to know what it is. And it's like peeling the layers of an onion, right? It's hard. But when you get it, then you got to go for it. And we have to go in and get it. And at least help them reframe it and realize that we don't control these things. In many cases, the situation's overdetermined. And that was the word that Jesse Taft used. When you go into that row house and you're walking into a situation where there's no money, where it's a single parent home maybe with 5 kids, and it's the middle of the Depression, and they barely make it through for the rent. That's where you start. Well, translate that to where you start when you go into a debriefing, something like the marathon. Or one baby not breathing call. That's where you start. So you didn't create that. But if we can, again, get it up and out, lessen the impact of the event, you've done something. And we're simply saying we don't always have 5 days, and we don't always have in a debriefing the capacity to fully get to that. So think about doing something a little more on a one-day basis. That's all we got. It was very nice of you to listen to that. And Linda just wanted to try to elicit some thoughts on... We have more? Oh, jeez. Oh, the empathy piece. Okay. All right, I forgot to deal with empathy. Yeah, empathy is important. Empathy, there's a lot of empaths in here. We haven't written a book on it. But let me just try to operationalize what is known about what empathy really is. Empathy is not sympathy. Empathy is not, oh, I'm really sorry about that terrible incident you have. Sucks to be you. I got to go. Empathy is much deeper. And it has, go ahead, these components to it, according to Robert Ionati many years ago, but I think that they ring true. First of all, and this is where peer support is so excellent, accuracy of the cognitive perception. Does the subject correctly understand the situation being presented? So I'm a firefighter, and I have to explain to you what a backstep man is. I'm a police officer. I have to explain what a Kevlar vest is. If we start there, it doesn't mean if you're the clinician and you're the only person who's working with that person, we can't simply say, hey, look, you know, I'm not sure what an MSN pack versus Scott pack is. What's the difference? What's the difference between the heads-up display and what Scott does? I can ask that, but so much better if it's Brian, who just sits right down, and maybe his department has used both of those packs. So the guy or the gal doesn't have to explain anything. So that's peer support. You can't get better cognitive aspect of it. Same with substance abuse. You know, why is it better for somebody who uses opiates to talk to somebody else who's got an opiate problem? Even me, an alcoholic in recovery, is not going to be anywhere near as good as somebody who's used perks, Vikes, oxys, and got hooked and really understands that particular addiction, because it's not the same as alcohol. So wherever we can match the peer to the situation being diffused or debriefed as close as possible, it works better, right? Fair enough? I'm not saying that an old guy like me has to debrief an old guy like me. It can be on a deeper level of understanding pain, but it is high perceived similarity between you and the person you're working with is a part of the one-day model. Degree of identification. Can the subject relate to the situation and the feelings aroused by it to anything that has happened in his or her own life? So we have a police officer that was killed doing a detail on a North Shore town in my state because an elderly driver just ran him over. And to make it worse, the family didn't really seem to care, and they were very indifferent about it. And the officer was killed. And we didn't have a police peer available to respond to that police station within 45 minutes. We had to send a fire guy. But it worked, because the fire guy was known by them very well. And he had been through many details and scenes at construction sites. And he understood the pain of that for that department. And he understood line of duty death. And they accepted him even though he wore the wrong uniform, because he was still from the same town and he still understood pain. and line of duty death. So sometimes we can't always match it exactly. But that's the second part of empathy. I got to feel that you can identify with what I'm doing. And if you're a mental person, and I'm working with a diver who's going to pick around bodies or shopping carts or pieces of a car in the bottom of the Charles River, and I don't dive, I really can only relate to the fear and the panic of maybe running out of air or getting entrapped, but far better be that Tommy or somebody who's actually been a diver. I don't know. I know you don't need to hear this, but that's important. You got to be able to perceive that we can identify with it. And to what extent can the subject put him or herself into that situation and imagine what it would be like? So we have to be careful because it's their incident, right? It's not our incident. And that's why we try to make sure, whether it's substance abuse or whatever the issue is, critical incidents, have you cleaned out your closet first? Are you doing CISM as a means of unloading or helping others before you cleaned out what you've been through? Because speaking of do no harm, you could be in the middle of debriefing an incident, whether it's a combat incident, a police incident, or a fire, and all of a sudden you kind of glaze over and you're someplace else because you're right back in that fire where you lost that 12-year-old child and you killed yourself to try to get that child. It just wasn't to be. And meanwhile, there's a person telling you a story and you're someplace else. So the definition of empathy by Carl Rogers included never losing that as if condition. It's as if it's my incident, but it isn't. I never lose the as if condition because it's paradoxical. You need a certain amount of distance to be able to be close to that person, if that makes any sense. If they're debriefing it with you or it's a one-to-one and you start crying, not that that can happen and not that sometimes that works in your favor because they know that you're affected too, but you got to be careful because it could have a chilling effect. You know our people. They want to take care of you. If you start breaking down while they're telling you the story, it can have a chilling effect. Sometimes they don't want to go any further. Oh, I don't want to upset you. So that's the reason why we have to be careful if we over-identify. And that's the reason why if you've been out there on the job and you're going to do peer support work, especially if you're going to do an intense, compressed one-to-one model or a one-day experience, we have to make sure that we take care of you. Do no harm. And that's really important. That's why the ICISF has that model of debriefing the debriefer. And there's another piece, degree of effective response. If the subject were able to, what would she or he do to help? It's not therapy. It's really not great after they finish telling you about the shoot incident in which they lost their partner, and you say, God, that's really tough. I got to go on shift now, but here's Tommy Greenhall's number if you have any problem this weekend. That's not the model. The model is, okay, and that's the safe R model. What's the last thing we do? Restoration of either pre-crisis level of functioning or referral to a higher level of care. So as that person is going out the door, and it's true in the one-day model as well, we want to, A, make sure they're safe. B, I might say, okay, so where are you going to park your fanny tonight? You're out of the big bed. You came here with an odor of alcohol. I'm glad you debriefed what you debriefed, but what's happening tonight? Because I need to know where you're going, who you're going to be okay, you can stay with your sister. Okay, you're sober right now, but that means no drinking tonight. And then tomorrow you're going to call Kalina, and she's going to hear from you at 10 o'clock, or maybe it's Kalina, 11 o'clock. But, and yeah, and we're going to get you to an AA meeting. It's got to be practical. It's got to be concrete. And George said in the SAFE-R model, I don't care if you write that plan on a napkin or if you use a standard safety contract form that your agency has developed. But the difference between this and therapy is that that person is not going out the door without an action step. We're on the hook. In other words, it didn't used to be that way. It used to be enough to do a good peer support intervention, and that's fine, see you later. Not now. Because we've lost too many people. If we lose 18 to 23 combat vets per day, And every year, we lose 4 to 6 times as many police officers by their own hand as by perpetrators. I think it's kind of important for us to make sure they go out of there with a plan. So that's just, empathy is a nice soft word. Yeah, I care about you. I want to make sure that I can see it through your eyes, but you can operationalize it. Cognitive accuracy, you have to be able to identify with it. There has to be an action step. Okay. Lessons learned, yeah. This actually went pretty well. Linda did the research. And not everybody, some people felt they wanted more. That's why I did that Jesse Taft thing. You know, well, it's just a one-day experience. You're not going to get what you would get in 5 days. And it's not therapy. But if people go into it with a reasonable expectation that they're just going to lessen what they've been through and jumpstart some of their own coping abilities, they do better. The people who had negative comments about it, and there were only a few, said, I needed more, I wanted more, it wasn't enough. And there were also people who'd been through a 5-day program. People who had never had anything were extremely grateful. They'd never had a whole day to take care of themselves, maybe an hour at most. I needed a good night's sleep before going back to reality. Yeah, it's tough. This is pedal to the metal. This is cleaning out a wound and then trying to dress it, stitch it, bandage it, and send them out the door with long-term wound management or long-term healing. That's going to have to be somebody else. And TFT, I've been using it a lot ever since, thanks to Tommy, or whoever did the TFT with that person. Tommy, could be Larry, yeah, that's great. And then EMDR was great. I wouldn't change a thing. So those are some of the comments. Anything else? Okay. I mean, there's a lot more, but everybody's getting that glazed look. It's time for dinner, and we appreciate you listening to that. And just before we wrap up, I know you want to ask. Okay. So does anybody have any questions? That was kind of, speaking of compressed, that was a romp through 5 days, 3 days, 20 years, 6,200 people. Yes?
When you do the one day, about what time do you start? About what time do you end?
Very good question. Actually, we give them till 10 because they have to drive to our facility. Okay. So we start at 10, and it can end at 4:30 or 5. But if we're doing EMDR, if we're lucky enough to tack EMDR onto the other end, it might go a little bit later. And because we do have a farm, if they want to stay over, what's your first name again?
Tina.
Tina, I thought it was. I know we have another Tina. I thought I was wrong. They can stay over, of course, but that's a luxury. If the CISM team does it, that might not be the case.
And you provide a lunch in the middle?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Painfully obvious. I don't miss many meals. Brian's cooking. Yes, yes. Any other questions? Is this something that, I don't know what state of development CISM teams are at, but does I know it sounds like a crazy idea, but does the thought that a couple of times a year you might pull people together and offer them a chance, it doesn't have to be rigid. They might just get together and talk about what this year has been like on the job. But I would like every emergency services unit to have the chance to talk about their work at least once a year and clear some of the stuff off and be with each other. And we can guide it, we can jumpstart it, but then stay out of the way. You know, we stay out of the way, yes.
Have you clarified that in that one day, do you end up doing all 7 steps?
No, we don't. It's very rare. I would love to, and we do. Sorry, I was supposed to, they're recording. We do try to follow the model, and if we can, I mean, everybody gets the introduction because they meet and greet, and they go around the room and figure out who they are, what they've done. Everybody has to at least get a description, beginning, middle, and end of what's in their face. If we can, we definitely want to get to the thought phase, especially if guilt is involved, and we do want to get to the reaction phase. And symptoms and teaching, we're doing the whole day. So they do get psycho-ed, so that's not afterwards. It's integrated into the experience. But it could be by 4 o'clock, they got to get back to be on shift. If we can, we really like to add rapid eye movement or TFT or something that reduces the symptoms a little more. But we might just wrap up with meditation, which we do. So somebody else says, yes, Tina.
Another question.
Yep.
Number of participants. Yeah. Limit how many come in a day.
3 or 4. It just, we can't do more than that. We've had 5, and it just, we couldn't do a good job. 4, I'd say, is pretty maximum for it. Because you want them to be able to, you don't want them to feel rushed. You know, when they start a fact phase, you don't want to say, oh, I'm sorry, your time's up, when they're right in the middle of talking about a crispy critter in a fire. That's not going to work, so.
I would like to commit, North Carolina would like to do some modeling of this program.
We'll help you any way we can. We have no pride of authorship. You can take this, carve it up, fillet it, adapt it to your own stuff. You're welcome to, we'll help you any way we can. But I think there is a value to going a little further, especially if a CISM team is pretty trained and pretty sophisticated, to offering something a little more for our towns and our communities. Hey, if nobody comes, you have a good lunch.
Can you
Yes, go ahead.
describe that a fact phase and a debriefing is different than our fact phase? Can you just tell them how detailed?
Well, you know, Jeff said when he invented this model, he doesn't feel this way now. The fact phase was the least interesting. It would go like 20 minutes. You really need to get to the guts, which was the reaction phase. Since, because we have, 30 years of doing this, then we found out that for the first responder population, the fact phase does double and triple duty anyway. In telling the story, a lot of feelings come out. Our people are used to writing police reports, run sheets, fire descriptions, so they actually get a lot out if you do a slow, detailed fact phase. So I will tell you, we go very slow. Tell us what happened before. Tell us how the call came in, because we're looking, was there an element of surprise? Can you take a snapshot of what you saw when you got there? First impressions are lasting. And what happened next? What happened next? What happened after that? No, as you know, no feelings questions. Just we really want to make sure we get the whole story out. And I can give you an example of where we almost missed the boat on that. You know, we had a fire crew in a Western Mass city that had a tragic fire. And, you know, children go to closets. So the children went in the closets and you know, they died. And that was bad enough. We go through this whole debriefing. Something's wrong. At the end, we're looking at each other. What are we missing? Is there a ghost in this room? Is this a throwaway incident? And actually, there was a worse one that they're not talking about? What's wrong? And we could just feel it, that it hadn't worked. And one of the guys, Spike Wallace, one of the firefighters, just happened to say, well, can I ask you, what's the last thing you remember from this incident? If you had to put a bookend on it, what's the very last thing operationally that happened? This was just a fact phase. Everybody looks at each other. Nobody wants to say anything. Then they tell us what the last thing was. The mother had been overcome trying to get out the front door. The front door collapsed, and she was underneath this big door from an old 1780s colonial. They had been walking over her the entire time they were doing overhaul, like a seesaw. Nobody thought to look underneath. Why is the door seesawing? And nobody wanted to say that. If we hadn't gotten that out, that debriefing would have been BS. Because speaking of doing harm, we would have brought all that stuff up. Now it's in their face, but we didn't get to the part that really, and so we ended up almost doing another debriefing then and going through the reaction phase on that and the first thoughts afterwards, which were guilt. So I'm just saying a fact phase, nice and slow, take your time, don't hurry, make sure that that person tells you how it ended as well. Because often that's the piece they just don't really want to say. Now, Jeff warns, don't do it to the point where they feel singled out or they feel like you're trying to do therapy. You're not. You're just trying to make sure you get sights, sounds, smells. If somebody doesn't want to do it, that's fine. Don't nail them and say, well, wait a minute now, I want you to go deeper. No. But if we can, that's the fact phase. And what else was I supposed to do other than stop? Oh, Jesus, time to stop. Were we supposed to give the code for the evaluation?
Yes, I have it.
Thank you. So listen, folks, thank you very much for listening. It's been great to have you here. I wish you a great conference.